Hi, my name is Mark Bernard. I'm a monetary economist. In this video, I want to talk about who is responsible for the poverty, economic poverty in Russia and the current situation. I think there's an underlying belief among Westerners that it's always the people in power in Russia. If we could only change the people in power, then we'll have a better relationship with Russia. If we could only strike negotiations or a peace accord with Russia, then we can warm relations and get on with our business. But is that true? My claim is the people responsible for the economic poverty in Russia are the Russian people. Okay, and I'm going to back it up. So as a secondary point is Russia impoverished? By any standard, Russia is impoverished. Let's talk about it. If you go to macroeconomic data, if you go to microeconomic data like user input numero, if you look at whether it be the ruble or the interest rate or however you measure it, but one of my favorite things to measure at this point is simply go to Google Maps and check out any town in Russia and how poor it looks. If you don't believe me that Russia's poor and a poor nation, if you've never been there, I have. I've spent a lot of time there. It is. It's very poor. They have tin roofs. They barely have paved roads. It's mostly dirt roads. They don't have plumbing. They have these small little gardens, maybe. Everything looks like from the last century. It's one of the most impoverished, poor countries, and you do not want to live there. There's massive pollution. Go to the MSN pollution map, and even in Siberia, you see tremendous pollution, unhealthy levels. And that's only a fraction of what they can show. That's just air pollutants and particles, not water and other types of things. Their houses are built with asbestos. There's lead in the pipes. It's a horrible economic situation. And the only people responsible for that are the Russians. And I'm not talking anything to do with genetics, of course. And I'm talking about a cultural modern trend. Genetics, they're the same as the Poles. Basically similar, or any other Slavic or Indo-European people, or any people in the world. We're all one, we're all equal, we all add up to 100%, but it's the trend and the mindset and the consciousness of the Russians. And the best thing is that, here's the kicker, they deny responsibility. They're always like, oh, it's just the leaders. Oh, if it wasn't for the leaders, we're just little people, we can't do anything, we protest, we'll get arrested. Malarkey. Baloney. And my three claims are based on, 1, the size of the country, 2, their actual view of the country in terms of centralization or decentralization, and 3, their mindset. So let's take a look at the claim that, it's Russia and Russia needs to be big, it needs to be strong. That is untrue. The smallest countries in the world are often the richest, whether it be Singapore, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Denmark, beautiful Denmark, okay, Ireland, Iceland, all these tiny little countries, these micro countries, tend to be sometimes the richest. And then you could say, well, what about the US and Canada? Okay, and I'm going to get to that. But Russia is the largest, and it's probably one of the most poorest. It's almost one of the poorest in the whole wide world. You can say that with India too, or China. So largest doesn't mean. So the first thing that the Russian mentality is that the larger the country is, the more that they expand, the greater Russia will be. And somehow it will expand the riches of the Russian people, the ordinary Russian people. And that is untrue. And a similar, United States, I hate to say it, I'm an American. And we have this consciousness. What am I doing with this snowman right over here? The snowman, you know what I'm doing? I'm practicing for Greenland, the Greenland annexation. How ridiculous is that? Whoever dreamt up the idea that, I believe the, future president is saying something like, can you imagine how great it is if we annex Greenland as Americans? Yeah, right. So I'm here practicing building snow building because that's going to be part of America, right? I mean, come on. I mean, it belongs to this autonomous country and maybe some protectorate of the Danish. He's going to take on Denmark, poor little Denmark. What do they make? Legos? Legos are great. Legos are for children. Great for spatial relationships. So the idea that a large country is a better country is a misnomer. The greatest countries in the world, some of them, and the richest, whether it be Sweden, Poland, Luxembourg, Ireland, okay, Switzerland, are the smallest and the richest, and the people have the longest life expectancies. Japan. You can say Russia, it's so big. They have the shortest life expectancies of the world, some of them. They have the highest HIV rates, the highest alcoholism rate. I did go on about the statistics. It is a nightmare in terms of, so the Russian people accept this notion, and up to 80% of the people support the Tsar in Moscow, the notion that bigger is better in terms of countries, and that's why we must expand and have an empire. You could say, that idea of NATO and all that, that's a ridiculous statement. The Tsar of Russia got that from the H guy in Germany in the 1940s because he used the same argument of encirclement. You can go back to the books and the historical books. It was the same language. So the Russian people support this idea of expansion, and the evidence is they give their lives on the front line. And if they didn't, they wouldn't. If I was a Russian, my grandfather was conscripted into the Russian army. He took off. He got out of there. That's a brave person. If I was a Russian, if I held a Russian passport and was self-identified as a Russian, I would get out of there too. I guess I get shot or thrown in jail, but I would not go to the front line. So they believe this bigger is better. The second thing is this: centralization is better. Having a strong leader. People feel a strong leader, that we must have no, I want a weak leader. I don't like bosses. I don't like leaders. The best countries in the world, the more decentralized a country is, the weaker their leadership. Like Switzerland, for example, have the most decentralized government in the world, is probably the richest government in the world. And you can make an argument for the United States and Canada. We're very decentralized compared to Russia, China, and North Korea and Iran. They're all centralized countries. Strong leaders make impoverished people. This idea of a czar is in the collective unconsciousness of Russia, that they want this fatherly figure. You know what that comes from? I'm going to tell you where it comes from. I feel a Star Trek episode coming up. Who mourns for Adonis? Okay? Human race replaced the Greek gods, the small g god, okay, because we evolved. You can look up Jacob Bronowski's The Ascent of Man. And he points out the tragedy of Hamlet is not that Hamlet dies, it's that he dies at the point that he's about to become to greatness. And the human race can come to greatness. We've jettisoned these ideas of, having a God, somebody who's a supernatural, I believe in God, the ultimate reality, but a leader, that humans are pack animals, that we must be led and have a strong leader. And that's inbred into the Russian mentality and the collective unconsciousness. We need a large country. We need a strong leader. That is the opposite of what you want for economic prosperity. Think about it. Most people want to go to the store, look around, get bored, don't know what spaghetti sauce to buy, and go home. They just want to be left alone. That is decentralized economics. That's Austrian economics. That's even Swedish economics. It's this microeconomic agents determining for themselves at a state level, at a regional level, how to live their lives. I don't want my neighbor. I don't want other people. I don't want bureaucrats telling me how I should live my life. But the third part is the collective unconsciousness of the Russians. They all say we are little people. We can't change. What are we going to do? It's the government. It's the government's fault. And that's the trap that the Russian propaganda tells the West. They're already preparing when this current leader leaves that we're going to have a better leadership. No, they're not going to have a better leadership. It's the mentality of the Russians that they can't change. Can you imagine if we had a czar here in Poland? What would the Poles do? They would rebel. Think about Germany in the 1930s and 40s. They were fighting in the sewers. They were taking it to the last man standing. That's Poland, liberty-loving people. In Russia, if you hold a Russian passport, what do? You embrace this, like, Novorossiya, new Russians, and just go to Thailand and stuff, and, we can't change. No. If I was a Russian, I would make change. And it's the responsibility of the Russian people to make, you can make peaceful change. I've told you avenues. You don't have to consume. You could be just protesting peacefully by not showing up at work. A sick-off, that's what they have, is like, when people strike, they don't go to work. In Poland, we had Solidarność. India, they had prayer and fasting. If I was a Russian, I would say, okay, it's the end of Christmas until Easter, I'm going to work at 25% speed. That would grind the Russian economy to a halt tomorrow. If all Russians said, I'm going to work at 25% speed, just enough so I don't get fired. That's a novel idea of a peaceful protest. They'll just arrest us. They can't arrest the whole country. And even if they do, so what? Right? So the reason Russia is one of the worst impoverished countries, measured by life expectancy, measured by HIV rate, measured by alcoholism, measured by one-family parents, measured by the lowest church attendance probably in the whole world, measured by any standard, and I'm an economist, I'm an academic economist, is that simply they buy the idea that they have no power. And like I said, if you see yourself as a speck of dust floating through the universe, that is what life will give you. And that's what the Russians have. But if you see yourself as great and magnificent, you can bring change to that country. So when the West is looking to negotiate with Moscow and hoping that there'll be a regime change and this will solve Russia, it's not going to solve Russia. Russia's going to go on for another 500 years, being Russia, continuing expanding. They're just going to propagandize Hungary, then Slovakia, now Bulgaria is being propagandized. Maybe they have somebody in Washington now who's going to be warming to Russian relations. It's the Russian people